Happy Sunday! This week's theme from the World Church is practice radical hospitality. Now there's a phrase. Radical means either of two things to me. It's a synonym for tubular, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second is extreme, like radicalized extremist. And I think that the World Church probably means it that second way, unless they're having a 80s flashback, which is possible. So what is hospitality practiced to a radicalized level? What would that look like? And who would practice it? I don't have a great answer for that myself, but the Bible might. And luckily, this week's story from Genesis gets us all the way up to the times of something resembling an actual historical era. Instead of the times of pure legend we've seen before with Eve and Noah and Abraham, we're now faced in this story with people placed in a context grounded in something that all of world history records. So this week, our story is about Joseph. And we're not really going to deal with the coat of many colors part, but we're going to deal with how Joseph radicalized hospitality and found a nation a home. So the story of Joseph starts with 12 brothers and apparently a half-sister. I didn't know that. I probably knew that part at some point, but I remember that part. But 12 brothers. And these 12 brothers are the sons of a man named Jacob, whom we also know as Israel. So that's why these other lessons have said that, Noah and Abraham, don't think of them as Israelites, because Israel wasn't even born yet. So here's Israel finally. We've finally gotten up to him, and now we can finally start thinking of Hebrew people more like we would have thought of them in a historical way. So like any siblings, Israel, 12 sons, Joseph. So like any siblings, these brothers don't always get along. Joseph was kind of the good sheep of the bunch, and the boys liked to prank him and everything. Joseph really got on their father's good side. He could interpret dreams. He had these interesting things. So the brothers come up with a really good prank. They sell him to the circus, smear blood on his clothes, and take them back to his dad and say, oh, he got ate by a lion, he's dead. It's hysterical, right? And they leave him for dead. They never see him again. Well, until the story. It's a good gag. They really got him. So Joseph kind of tumbles along after that. And kind of has this series of adventures like a Disney cartoon, and finds himself eventually through encounters and the way he handles himself and everything, eventually finds himself in a place of importance in the Egyptian court. He finds favor with the Pharaoh, mostly from his knack of interpreting dreams, but also a little bit through diplomacy and other things. And the Pharaoh really comes to like Joseph and makes Joseph the vizier. I don't really know what a vizier is. I think there's one in Aladdin, though. So I assume that it's just another part of Disney Adventures. I don't know. Anyways, and that gets us to our story. So there's been a couple years of famine, and Joseph's prankster brothers are sent on a journey to Egypt to buy provisions to survive this famine. And remember, Joseph took a really long and circuitous trip through kind of misfortune and fortune to get to Egypt. So this is many years after they faked his death. And he's now been made the vizier. So the brothers get to Egypt, and the first thing that happened is that they're taken to the vizier, but they didn't recognize him. However, Joseph did recognize them and chose not to speak to them in the native tongue of Israel. Because he's like, they don't recognize him because it's been years, and they sold this kid into the circus, and now there's this adult. So they see this Egyptian man, and instead of this Israelite boy, and so then he's like, well, if I speak Egyptian, that's going to even further make it hard for them to tell. After questioning his brothers, he hears about that they have this younger brother back home, because he's kind of questioning them about their lives and everything. And he kind of accuses them of like maybe making up where they're from and who they are. So he demands that they bring the younger brother back to show that this is, these stories they're telling check out a little bit. This younger brother was Benjamin, and Joseph kind of got along with Benjamin. And so then Joseph throws his brothers in prison for 3 days, just to kind of show them that he's the boss. And on the third day, he brings them out of prison, says, I want to see this younger brother. And then, then they kind of all start talking amongst themselves. And they decide to speak in their Israelite tongue, thinking that then Joseph and the Egyptian court won't be able to tell what they're talking about. And they're talking about, well, do we bring this younger brother? What if something bad happens to him? Remember the other younger brother that we sold to the circus and faked his death, and he probably is dead now, or gosh only knows what's happened to him. And Joseph understands what they're saying, right? He does speak the tongue of his father, and it overwhelms him, hearing the story again, going back to that, and hearing the remorse and all of it overwhelms him. So he has to kind of take himself out of the situation for a second and just have a moment and, feel these feelings. When he returned to them, having regained his composure as the vizier, putting back on this, I am the vizier, Joseph takes one of the brothers, Simeon, and takes him as a hostage. And then he has the other brother's donkeys prepared with all the grain and everything that they'd come to buy. And they give him their money. And he sends them back to Canaan. That's where Israel lives at the time. Unbeknownst to them, Joseph also has returned the money given as payment. He's put it back in their saddlebags. So the brothers return to their father in Canaan without Simeon and tell Israel all that's happened in Egypt. They also discover that all of their money bags are still full, have the money in them. And this disquiets them, right? If you go and buy a car, let's pretend you went and bought this car and you paid cash, and you paid $15,000 in cash for it. And you drive off the lot, and you get it, and the car dealership's far away from your home. You get it all the way back home. It's a 3-hour drive. And you pop the trunk, and there's your $15,000 in the trunk. And you're like, what happened? Did I forget to give it to them? Why is this here? This shouldn't be here. Your first thought is not, yay, $15,000. It's kind of, you're freaked out. And so they're disquieted by this, and they tell their dad that the vizier wants them to come back with Benjamin. So he's already the vizier's taken one brother. He wants to see another one. Israel is pretty disquieted too. But eventually they eat through all the grain that they've bought because this famine's ongoing. And Israel says, well, you've got to go back to Egypt and work this out. And the brothers persuade their dad to let them take Benjamin to make good on this promise, because they don't want the vizier mad that they come back without Benjamin. So they go back to Egypt, and the steward of the house of the vizier comes out. I imagine Mr. Smithers from The Simpsons. and the steward brings them in to Joseph's house, to the vizier's house, and they're nervous, right? Because they've got this $15,000 they weren't supposed to have, and they're not sure what's going on. He wants to see this brother. It's because they're nervous. They've messed up the previous transaction, and so what if he says, hey, you stole that $15,000, and everything that wasn't supposed to go with the car. You bought the car, and you're supposed to take the car and leave the money here, and you didn't do that, and now here you are back at the car lot, so you have to be a used car salesman forever. I'm going to make you a slave. So they're nervous about that. So immediately they tell the steward, they tell Mr. Smithers, hey, look, we were on the up and up. We did everything right. We left the money. We don't know how the money got back to us. But the steward says, okay, maybe it's just a mix-up. We'll figure all that out. And they bring out Simeon. Simeon's all right. He hasn't had anything horrible happen to him. And then they all go into Joseph's house, and the household receives them with great hospitality, continuing our Disney theme, be our guest. So, after presumably all the cups and plates and candlesticks singing a grand song about how they should stay there and be happy, Joseph comes out, and his brothers give him gifts from their father, give Joseph gifts from Israel. And Joseph sees Benjamin, and he's kind of overcome by emotion because he liked Benjamin. So he has to kind of take a second again. He's been through some trauma here, and it keeps coming back up. But he gets himself put back together and returns and has a lavish meal set out for his brothers, these brothers that have done horrible things to him. So that night, while the brothers are sleeping off this great meal, Joseph orders his steward, Mr. Smithers, to load the brothers' donkeys with food and again put their money in. And this time they brought double the money. So then Joseph decides to play a little prank of his own this time to get him back. And he puts one of the cups from his silver, really fine dining set into Benjamin's saddlebag. So the brothers wake up, get on their donkey, start heading back to Canaan. And then Joseph orders the Egyptian troops or whatever to go stop the brothers and inspect their saddlebags. So the troops come out. They say, "Hey, this silver cup went missing from the vizier's household. You guys know anything about that?" And the brothers are like, "No." But then when their bags are searched, there's the silver cup. So then they're like, "Oh, what is happening? This is not good." So they come back to Egypt. They're brought back to Egypt, and the vizier grills them about this silver cup. Joseph's like, why did you take this? What are you doing? And so Joseph does this time. He says, "Yeah, you're going to have to be a used car salesman forever. I'm keeping Benjamin. He's going to be mine. I'm keeping that one." And in response, the brother Judah, of whom the Jews are named, pleads with the vizier that Benjamin be allowed to return to Canaan and that Judah become the used car salesman forever in Benjamin's place. So at this point, Joseph breaks down because presumably his brothers have learned a good lesson here, right? They've learned that they have to stick up for each other. And here's Judah, one of the worst pranksters, saying, "Keep me instead of Benjamin." So Joseph then sends all his Egyptian servants out, and he says to his brothers, "Hey, I'm Joseph," and he speaks Israeli to them, and he weeps so loudly that even the household staff outside can hear him. The brothers are frozen, and they don't know what to say. And Joseph brought them closer to relay to them all his adventures and tells them not to fear because their evil acts have brought him good from God. Then Joseph commands the brothers to go and bring their father and his entire household into Egypt to live in the province of Goshen because there are 5 more years of famine left according to Joseph's dream powers. Joseph gives the brothers really fine Egyptian wagons, new clothes, plenty of money, and 20 additional donkeys to carry all the provisions they'll need for the journey and then also help carry Israel's household back to Egypt. And so Israel and his entire house of 70 gather all their livestock and begin their journey to Egypt. As they approach Egyptian territory, Judah goes out ahead of the caravan to ask where they should stay. And Joseph says, "Okay, head over here." They're dispatched accordingly and sent on. And then Joseph, he just talked to Judah. So then Joseph gets himself made up really fine and in grand fashion goes out in his chariot to meet his father. It's been over 20 years since Joseph's seen his father. So this is an estranged relationship. But when they meet, they embrace and weep together. And Israel, Joseph's father, then remarks, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive." Afterward, Joseph's family personally gets to meet the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's honored by their stay, and even kind of promotes some of them to places of honor. Because the Pharaoh likes Joseph so much, likes his vizier so much, the Pharaoh finds it an honor to meet Joseph's father. And so Israel is able to bless the Pharaoh. Extending all the hospitality of the land of Egypt, the Pharaoh then settles the family comfortably in Goshen. Totally tubular. So Joseph's brothers have all but killed him. They sold him to the circus as a baby and tell their father he's dead. And that's about as hostile as a person can get to another person, I can imagine. I mean, sure, you can shoot people and stuff, but selling somebody to the circus and telling their family they're dead, I mean, pretty bad. And the person who gets sold to the circus and loses their father and everything and their home, that kind of trauma sits with you, you know. That stays in your body. That sits in your cells. So even though Joseph has the upper hand when these brothers return, I have to imagine he felt terror seeing them, right? He probably was kind of scared. But they were his family and his brothers, and they were strangers in need and beseeching his kingdom, Joseph's kingdom, for help. So Joseph took a few minutes to cry to himself in our story, right? He first sees him and he has to kind of go cry. He doesn't hide that he's afraid or that he has these strong emotions. I mean, he doesn't show it to them, but he doesn't hide it from himself. He doesn't even really bury the fact that he was scared of them or angry or remorseful for the time of loss that they had put him through. That pain and grief were all there. And yet, he still shows them hospitality. Multiple times that word hospitality was in the story. And at first, it's a little covert, right? Like he does put them in prison and everything. He doesn't just say, "Oh, hey, it's my brothers, yay." And he kind of plays with them, and giving them their money back, but then doing it under mysterious circumstances. But then he keeps building on that subtle hospitality by finding little ways to snooker them back that may help them keep coming. And eventually that all pays off in them finding a new land in his home. So all the world church is asking for is that we approach acquaintances and invite them to church. We don't even have to practice the radicalized hospitality that Joseph did, because Joseph's hospitality was radicalized. It involved troops. It involved like full on, events here. We're just asked to approach acquaintances and invite them to church. And I'll admit, that's not something I'm ever comfortable doing. It may never be. I don't know. Because I've been hurt before by people who turned me away because of my religion. Having a religion is trying to find the right words for what I mean by it, but it can. We know it can rub people the wrong way, for sure. So stepping out onto that limb of saying this is who I am can be scary. Then inviting people into that spiritual home who maybe they won't like it. Maybe the church won't like them. You hope they will, but who knows? Just so much could happen. That's scary too. What if you get cast out? What if Joseph had brought his brothers in and the Egyptians find out about Joseph's, Israeli past and then hate him and he gets kicked out, or a million bad things happen. But if Joseph can find the strength to bring the brothers that hated and tried to ruin him to a new physical home, And I think we could probably all find ways to extend the hospitality of our spiritual home to those around us. Think so too? Tubular. On a bit of a housekeeping note, I'm going to take July off. I'll have my sons here on summer break, but I will probably start these back up in August. I hope that everybody's been enjoying them, been getting good feedback. God bless, and have a wonderful week and month.